Hello everybody, another sunny day in Thailand, not a cloud in the sky, completely blue. Gonna be an energy-filled day, that's for sure. Today what I wanted to talk about was actually the monitoring system. So we're gonna define the monitoring system. The monitoring system is a way for both installers and customers, users, to observe the solar system. In the monitoring system, you can see all kinds of values, production, summaries of production over time periods. You can see over day, over week, over month, over year. And also you can see values like volt and amp and things like that, both DC and AC, and even other values that the meter controls. And you can control export on and off and many other things. Now the monitoring system works in the way that the information is sent to a server that the manufacturer has, and then from that server it comes to the installer app and the customer app. So every customer has an app on the phone and a website on the laptop or desktop, and with that they can download the data from the server. Usually that's in China now, because almost all manufacturers except a few are in China, so it's most of the time the servers are in China. Now the monitoring system is divided into three different systems. So you have the manufacturer access, which is top level, that they have access to all parameters, can change everything. They can move plans around from accounts to other accounts. Absolutely everything. Of course, that's logical. You might even have different levels inside there, but that's not important for us. We can use a broad category, and we can call that manufacturer access. The next level is the installer access, which also has access to a lot of things. And then after that, you have the client access, which is the least amount of things that you can change. But normally the observation level is quite similar, that you can observe a lot of the same data. For example, energy levels, curves, all kinds of stuff. But an installer has the possibility to change a lot more. So that's why the installer can help and change many things if there's a problem. For example, over voltage from the grid, or under voltage, which is more common in Thailand. That's a good example, because that is probably the most common problem that we encounter, is when the grid is supplying not enough voltage in the electricity. So when it goes below about 190, most inverters will stop. And then we can expand that range a little bit. Not too much, because then the whole system becomes unstable and the inverter it doesn't work. We can only expand it a little bit, maybe to 180 or to 170 sometimes. Not more than that, because more than that, then it's a problem that has to be fixed on the grid. Well, actually, even 170, 180 is a problem that should be fixed. But anyway, that's part of a different discussion. Let's take an easy example. If the customer has a grid that sometimes gives 180 volt, we can expand the range to 180 volts, and then the inverter will not stop. Instead, it will continue, and then the system will run more smoothly. And that's fine. It can happen that we do things like that. And that can be done remotely. We call that volt range expansion. Now, that is one example of many things you can do on a system. Some things you have to be all things you have to be careful, but some things you have to be very careful. And if you do a change, you will destroy things. For example, if you change the frequency, you will destroy things. Inverter, you can destroy. Other things, breakers will trip. So that is why those parameters are not available for the client to change. So that's why the monitoring system works differently for a client versus an installer. And that is because so that the installer can help the client fix things remotely, but those things are not available for the client because it's dangerous. You need knowledge, you need to be able to understand what you can change within what parameters, and also in some cases you have to have specific knowledge from the manufacturer when you are doing a change, and that's much more easy for an installer to get compared to a client. So for all these reasons, the installer account is different from the client account. Now, there are a few situations, very few. Actually, we in our company, we have never encountered a situation like that. But there could be a situation where the client does not want the installer to have access. Why would that happen? Well, the easiest example is if the installer is doing something strange that the client does not want. Or from privacy reasons, that the client doesn't want somebody to be able to access and see the values of the solar system. That can be, for example, such a thing like that the client, the user, doesn't want anybody to be able to see, for example, that the usage is in some days is lower, which some people can take as an indication there is nobody at home. And then that knowledge can be used by people. Now, obviously, if you are a serious installer, you will never let that happen. And you will never talk about profiles in open settings. You will never be using that information from one client in any situation other than very general, that you cannot pinpoint it and the information cannot be used. So all of those concerns for some clients can lead to the fact that they want to have the installer not have access to their account. It will have to be quite serious, because once you sort of kick out the installer, you don't have the help anymore from the installer account. Obviously, when there is a problem. So that means that when there is a problem, first of all, you are completely alone. You have no installer to talk to about fixing that. And you have to get another company or fix it yourself. Both of those things are not easy. Obviously, installers have a lot of experience, at least the good ones, have a lot of experience and can use that knowledge properly in solving different problems. So experience is very, very important in troubleshooting in solar. So if you don't have that, even if you are engineer at a high level, electrical engineer, if you haven't worked with solar, you're going to have a hard time fixing it, just because it's a lot about experience with certain brands and all kinds of stuff. Of course, if you are very knowledgeable, you have a higher chance than others, but there are going to be some problems that are not solvable. There was an enormous bumblebee here, just hovering above me. I'll just leave it alone, and it will hopefully leave me alone. So I want you to think very, very carefully if you have an installer. I mean, like I said, we have never had this happen with us, so it's not relevant if you have a good installer. An installer should be able to talk to all the clients, and of course there can be situations where a conflict cannot be avoided, and then the client wants the installer out, so to speak. But when you do that, it has a lot of consequences. Unless you get an installer account, you will not have access to all those parameters to change, obviously. So if you have a problem with your system, you will not be able to solve it. That's a really serious issue that you have to think about. Then you have to talk to the manufacturer and beg them to give you an installer account. How that's gonna go, it's a real random, depends on the manufacturer, depends on this and that. some few cases you will be able to get an installer account, while in other cases you will not. And that's not part of an installer job. So as an installation company, we are not responsible for things like that. So it's something you have to discuss directly with the manufacturer, but it is a really difficult situation. So you really, as a client, you should really think about those things closely before you do it. And obviously you should think about that before you do the installation, because it should come into the consideration which installation company you are using, but that the likelihood is the smallest to get a problem like that. You know, because once you have that problem, it's really hard. So make that part of your installation company selection when you select the company you want to work with. And it's the same as always. Cheaper is not always better, or in most cases actually worse. In these cases, serious installation companies might be a little bit more expensive, but in return you get proper support, and when you have a problem you will get proper remote support using the monitoring system. Okay, that's it for now, guys.